This is the Plant Yourself Podcast. I'm Howard Jacobson of PlantYourself.com and the Big Change Program with Josh LaJaunie. This podcast is part of my mission to help you live a heroic and heartfelt life. So I'm gearing up for a really good fall, 2017, for the podcast. I just got back from Plant Stock, run by Engine 2, up at the Esselstyn Farm in upstate New York, and I met doctors, documentary filmmakers, researchers, venture capitalists, really cool folks, and I got a whole bunch of them to say yes to appearing on the podcast in the coming months, so I'll tell you more about that as things shake out. I'm also really happy to let you know that I'm up to $355 a month in patronage on Patreon, which is more than a third of the way to my first stretch goal of $1,000 a month. And I was thinking about this recently because I really value the freedom that I have in this medium to evolve. When I look back at my early podcast, it was almost all cookbook authors. And I was really into recipes and ingredients and cooking. And as I have changed and grown, I've focused much more on health aspects, on much more holistic aspects of health. And, you know, with the partnership with Josh LaJaunie on running and discomfort, and you can see the breadth of my interests have really shifted and changed. And if I was just being, you know, sponsored by Vitamix or a cookbook publisher, I probably wouldn't have even tried to go there. But having the freedom to tackle whatever I want without worrying about losing my funding source is really wonderful. And so the Patreon thing, where people can contribute $1 a month, $6, $18 a month, means that if a few people don't like what I'm doing and they leave, that it's not such a big deal. And that's particularly useful for when I go into topics that I really haven't covered. Like, I really have not done a lot around animal welfare and animal rights. And it's not because I hate animals, but it hasn't been my scene. And I've had traditionally a lot of issues with the way some mainstream vegan organizations and vegans that I know have kind of turned people off with their, judgmentalism and making people feel not so good who are not where they are yet. And so honestly, I've shied away from that. And it's been fairly recent in the last, let's say, 3 to 6 months that I've really started feeling the ethical impetus toward a plant-based diet as strongly as I have felt the health impetus for a really long time. And so today's interview goes along with that. My guest is an incredible human being. I'm not going to go too much into his story because it's out there for you on a couple of amazing TED Talks and in this interview itself. His name is Damien Mander, and he was a professional soldier, a sniper, a hostage recovery specialist, a clearance diver, which is the Australian version of Navy SEALs, and he spent many years, 12 tours of duty in Iraq as a private contractor. And during that time, he amassed a fortune, as a soldier or fortune can do in war zones where there's a lot of money being spent on outcomes. And by 2008, when he had finished, he really didn't know what to do with himself. As he put it, he had a really shitty skill set for normal society. All he knew how to do was wartime things. I'll let Damien pick it up from here, how he went from soldier to one of the most important conservationists on the planet and a fierce defender of animals, lover of animals, and someone who has Jane Goodall on the board of his organization, the International Anti-Poaching Federation, and how his change of heart came about, and how he challenges each of us to raise our own game, to protect these innocent creatures, and to create the world that we want to live in. So without further ado, Damien Mander, welcome to the Plant Yourself Podcast.
Howard, mate, thank you very much for having me on today.
Yeah, so just, let's let folks know where you're calling in from. Give us some context.
Mate, I am calling in from Victoria Falls in the lovely Zimbabwe. So first got based over here in 2009 and have been moving around the region. But this is where I've set up shop now, mate. And as they say, home is where you dig it.
Right. So let's begin just with a general introduction. I'm guessing that a lot of folks have seen your two TEDx talks, but let's start with you founded an international organization, the IAPF, right?
Correct. Yeah.
So tell us what that is and kind of what you're up to.
So the IAPF, or the International Anti-Poaching Federation, is an organisation I set up in 2009 after travelling through the southern half of the continent, working with rangers who were stationed out here on the front lines protecting animals, and seeing the huge gap that existed between what I experienced as a soldier and a special operations soldier and spending time in Iraq and seeing the budgets that governments are willing to put towards these the wars that we're fighting in the Middle East, and I was over there fighting for resources in the ground and dotted lines on a map, and I came over here and I saw these guys fighting for the heart and lungs of the planet and all the animals that inhabit these massive ecosystems, and whereas I had anything I wanted in the military. And working within a $500 billion budget at the time as part of that operation over there, and coming over and just seeing a lot of guys out here didn't even have boots, ammunition to put in the magazines to go out there and face armed insurgent-like poachers. People that didn't even have the right uniforms, and there's just a huge imbalance. So I don't love the drones that patrol the skies in the Middle East, the defence budgets we used to have, or all the equipment I had as a soldier. I only love what a fraction of that could do for the people out here on the front lines. And the IAPF was set up with a mission of wildlife conservation through direct action. So we go out there and work with rangers. We help build strategies for these guys working in some of the most hostile areas on the continent, and we give them what they need to hold up the last line of defence for animals.
So you come to this from a background in the military, and your story is so fascinating because you're such a man of peace, and you're also born and bred of the military, and you haven't renounced the military tactics and strategies and tools even as you've become a man of peace. What got you into the military in the first place? Like way back in the day, what attracted you?
Yeah, I used to get up as a kid, really young, just 13 years old, and I'd go down to the local pier where the fishermen used to fish overnight trying to catch calamari or squid, and I would dive down there, free dive down there, and collect all the fishing lures and come back up and sell them back to the fishermen. And I actually saw that this was, quite a lucrative, business opportunity for a 13-year-old entrepreneur. And went and got a heap of shopping trolleys and threw them in the water, and then went and stole a heap of rope and wrapped them around the shopping trolleys, and then all of a sudden people kept losing more fishing lures, and I started making more money. And and I thought I was just running a great little business at the time. I was actually preparing myself for one of the hardest military courses on the planet, and that was entry into the Australian clearance diving branch. So I ended up joining the Australian Clearance Diving Association.
So what is clearance diving?
That's our version of your SEALs, Australia's version of your SEALs. So we do a wide range of different tasks. One of them that branched off after September 11 was the counter-terrorism role. And Australia stood up what they termed the first and last resort for a terrorist attack on home soil, and that was the Tactical Assault Group. And after all the selections, there was around 50 men left, and those men formed the first ever TAG East in Australia. And I went into that unit and became a sniper, and eventually went off to Iraq, working over there as a private contractor and working with as an advisor and specialist with the US military, and did a dozen tours there over the years, and finished up like a lot of people that finish in the military or finish going into these conflict zones, for a lot of guys out there, the war doesn't truly start until the bullets stop and you come home and try to reintegrate back into society. And it's tough. You're trained up to these elite standards. You're working with an elite team that surrounds you and is more concerned about your own welfare than you are about looking out for yourself. And you just form the most incredibly tight and trusting team that you're ever a part of, and you've got a very specific task to go out there and achieve your missions on a daily basis, and you really have purpose. And then it stops, and it's really tough for a lot of people that have some of the most highest levels of training imaginable, and all of a sudden the purpose for which way they were created is taken away. And I ended up in South America, traveling around trying to piece together my life and what to do with essentially what is a shitty set of skill sets that I've got, not really useful in normal society. And I found a use for those skills, and that was in protecting animals. And
Yes.
Yeah, sorry, mate, go.
Yeah, it's so interesting because we started this conversation where you were kind of, denigrating your reasons or the reasons for these wars, resources in the ground and dotted lines on a map, and yet at the same time you felt a sense of purpose that most people don't feel. So the sense of purpose must have been very sort of intimate, as opposed to we have this larger purpose within the war effort, right? It was just me and my group helping each other out and accomplishing the task in front of us.
Yeah, exactly. A very specific task about what needs to be achieved, and going out each day and staying alive was the first task, and then and whatever was thrown at us. And it's my where I was, the person I was, or the person I grew up as, has changed significantly over the years. And I was a hunter, and the worst type of hunter, the hunter that killed for fun, not for food. And I grew up having very little respect for wildlife or the environment or animals. We had a dog, and that was about the extent of my love of nature. And I don't know what it was, man. I'm in Iraq. I think Iraq affects anybody that goes over there and sees what's happening, and it affected me seeing what was happening to the local people, the local population, and people just trying to live their lives and having that life destroyed. And slowly this facade that I had around me, this macho facade, which mostly bullshit, slowly getting thinned out and broken away by seeing all that stuff, and then really strong in internal contemplation and examination of what am I here for on this planet. And when it was all over, and then getting involved with animals, and I came to Africa. I wasn't looking for a cause. I was looking for a fight. Just like I didn't join the military to serve my country. I did it because it was adventure. And I didn't go to Iraq to try and help the situation. I went there to make money. And so, when I arrived in Africa, it was going to be 6 months adventure, run around the bush, hunt some poachers, and then move on to the next adventure. The next place that I could demonstrate, how brave I might be, or how macho I am. Yeah.
At that point, you might have been, taking a gig with poachers as much as against them. Like there was no,
wherever the thrill is going to come from. Yeah, I mean, I used to poach. Mm-hmm. Used to poach in Australia. I used to go out and illegally hunt deer. So I know what it's like to be a poacher. And I don't know what it was. It was seeing these animals over here in Africa. It affected me in a way that. Iraq didn't affect me. I don't know why. Maybe it was just that gradual breaking down of this facade over time that allowed me to start opening up my eyes and seeing, the capacity for animals to suffer. I realized very quickly that there was more to me being here in Africa than just running around the bush for 6 months having an adventure. Seeing the hard work of these rangers, they dedicated everything in their lives to be out there, on the front lines, defending nature with their own lives. And for a very small salary, and here was me trying to have an adventure on the back end of their hard work, and that was wrong. And the second part
were the
was
Rangers?
Yeah.
Yes. Sorry. Were the Rangers the first group of people who were like you in terms of, sort of putting their lives on the line as warriors who were fighting for some obviously transcendent cause?
Look, they reminded me of the focus that I had when I was in the military, and the groups we were part of. I mean, you could have told us to do anything in the military, and we were programmed to do what we're told, and we're very good at doing that. And the Rangers were the same, but they had a higher cause. They had a higher cause, and that. I mean, these guys could be out taking other jobs and getting paid more money, but they chose to do this, and they chose to do it for a small salary, and most of them do it for life. 30, 40 years of being out there switched on in an environment where the biggest threat is not the armed poachers you're trying to stop. The biggest threat is the very animals you're trying to protect. And it very quickly, became a reality that there was much more to this than just spending 6 months here. And I put my money where my mouth was. I sold everything I had, every cent. From every house that I'd acquired from my time in the military, my time in Iraq, and I put it towards starting this organisation.
So when you were starting to realize that your thrill seeking was sort of cheap and bought at the expense of these people's lives, what were the conversations that you were having? Did you sort of ask them point blank, like, why are you doing this? It doesn't make any sense, or were they sort of indulgent with you or schooling you? Like I'm trying to imagine that scene in the movie where you start to unpeel the facade in a powerful way. Can you help me see that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm out there living with these guys in the bush and experiencing the hardship alongside them, being part of their unit. And their hardship was much different to the hardship we had in our militaries. Our militaries, it was like an imposed hardship. We need to train as hard as possible so we are the best. Whereas the guys in the bush out here are not only training and operating in very difficult environments, but they're actually living in it. And there's no change for them. That is their entire life. In the military, I could go and leave, go and take some time off, take a vacation, go and spend some time in a nice hotel, around a nice swimming pool, go to a nice bar, go to a nice restaurant. These guys don't get that. Okay, they are there right now, out there in the bush. And not just in Africa, not just in Zimbabwe, all around the world. It doesn't matter what you're into. You're watching National Geographic channel, reading the magazine, coming on safari to Africa. Anything in the world that has anything to do with nature, it all comes back to the one group of people on this planet that are actually responsible for the survival of these ecosystems, and that is rangers. And without them, the natural world would be lost.
What are their motivations? Because I know a lot of them, come from communities where there's economic hardship, and maybe maybe some of the poachers are kids they grew up with, right? Who've just taken a different approach. What makes them, get up every morning and keep doing this? Is it a love of animals or of Africa or some other ethic? Like, what drives them?
Different things drive different people. Some people like the challenge. They're protecting something, and someone else is trying to take that away from them. Some want the paycheck. Some are intrinsically have a higher level of awareness, and they are there to protect animals and protect nature. Some have been born into a family that has been involved with tourism or been involved with conservation for a long time. And ultimately, what our job to do is to recognise and understand why people are there in the first place, but to give them a very deep understanding that's ingrained over a long period of time, that their job is the most important job in the world, And we need them to feel like that and to understand that, because I truly believe their job is the most important in the world. I mean, what is more important than protecting the natural world with your own life? Yeah, I can't think of we've been given one backyard as an international community, and we treat it like a fucking garbage dump. And there's this one group of people on the planet it's the only group of people on the planet that give up every single thing in their life to be out there and representing an international community and its protection. And it's very hard to be truly inspired in today's world. There's a lot of bullshit everywhere. These guys do it for me. They really, truly inspire me, and the opportunity to support them and make their job and their life a little bit easier in the difficult task that they've been given. That's a great opportunity and a great privilege for me.
When you decided to liquidate everything and put all your resources towards this cause, I'm a typical sort of, suburban American civilian. So my vision of your life before is like, from a few Jason Bourne movies.
Yeah.
Where, you've got your houses around the world. Each of them has like a fully gassed Jeep, and you've got passports, and it's almost like I'm picturing these as kind of various escape hatches from whatever sort of difficulty. So, giving all that up, was it simply like, should I understand it as just, you liquidated your assets, but you could always make more, or was this like burning the ships before, as you land? Like, what did it mean to you to do that liquidation?
I remember watching my own personal bank account going down and having a sense of relief, because I knew once that figure hit zero that I would have no other choice but to seriously figure out in a very short space of time how to make this work and make it work properly. And we did that. There's no greater motivation than hunger, and hunger comes from an empty bank account, man. And when I'd spent every cent and made some mistakes in the way I spent it, I learned some lessons. I like to think of them as school fees. I didn't go to university, but I've gone to the University of Life, and getting involved with it. I got no business background or anything. So 8 years ago when I started this, it was literally I arrived in Africa with a set of boots and carry-on luggage, my backpack. That was it, and a one-way ticket. So I didn't know how to run a charity or a not-for-profit organisation. I had to figure all that out as I go along. How to write a legal document, your mission, your objectives, how to put together a poster for fundraisers, a project proposal for government, a budget, reports for donors. Had to learn how to public speak. I'd never done that before. Had to give an interview to a newspaper, a radio station, a TV camera. How to live and work in the African bush with lions, with elephant, with rhino, with buffalo. How to wake up and you've got snakes and scorpions, deadly scorpions in your house. All that sort of stuff was a massive learning curve for me, and I'm still learning. But we've built a robust organisation. It's now registered in 5 countries. There's 6 on its way. It's been registered in Germany now. We've supported over 50 projects in the field, as well as running 6 of our own major campaigns. We've just been given the GuideStar Platinum level rating. And GuideStar is an independent charity evaluator. It determines how effective we are with other people's money and fulfilling our mission. Okay, so 0.5% of charities achieve that highest status of platinum level. We've got the likes of Dr. Jane Goodall, who sits as our patron on our advisory board. We've been on 60 Minutes a couple of times, National Geographic magazine a couple of times. So we've come from literally nothing and grown up over time, over the last 8 years, and become a real power player in the conservation movement.
Mm. So aside from the money that came from all the liquidation of your assets, what did you feel like you could bring that the poaching efforts didn't already have?
I brought a fresh set of eyes to conservation. There's a lot of people that have been involved with conservation here for many decades and done a fantastic job. I have the luxury, I suppose I call it, of coming from current conflict current special operations units where you can see some of the tactics and equipment that are being used, and try and adopt some of that on the ground here in Africa. It's not everything we've tried to put in or implement has been perfect, but some of it has been significant. It's. I think too. For me, when I started in this, I was 29, and I think experience is a really critical thing, particularly if you're managing big projects and growing organisations. But there's something that's got to be said about the enthusiasm of youth, and I don't know if it was my age or if it was the purpose that I found in this, but I don't work. I don't work for a living. This is not a job for me. This is a passion. It's something I never get out of bed in the morning. I'm like, shit, I've got to go to work, or I've got to go out and do this today or that. It's not that. I'm involved with supporting something that's much larger than me. And I'm driven and I've got purpose, and that's. I think that's a beautiful thing to find. There's a lot of people, it's particularly a lot of people that come out of the military that don't have that purpose or struggle to find it. I always knew I'd find it traveling. I had no idea it'd have anything to do with animals or the environment. It's just where I landed, and I'm grateful for that.
So let's talk a little bit about poaching. So, my family and I, we spent a year in South Africa in 2011, 2012. So, we got to see these amazing, beautiful animals, and we would hear stories and see images. But what is, for someone who's not thought about this much, like what's the state of African wildlife regarding their health, their numbers, and what does poaching have to do with it?
Yeah, so us as an organisation, we focus on protecting the hardest animals to look after. The hardest animals are elephant and rhino, and the reason they're the hardest to look after is because of the value of their horn. In the case of a rhino, around $35,000, $40,000 a pound, and a rhino can easily have 30 pounds on it. Or in the
say that number again. $35,000 to $40,000 a pound.
Correct. Yeah, and you can have 20 to 30 pounds on a rhino, no problems. You can have 5 or 6 rhino in a herd. No problems. So these things should be locked up in a safe, not running around in the bush. The second high target species that we like to refer to it as is elephant, and the value of its tusk. Somewhere between 350 and 550,000 elephants are around the continent, dying at a rate of around 30 to 35,000 a year. You can see that if something drastic isn't done, that these animals are going to continue marching towards extinction. Now, what we do in developing strategies that protect the hardest animals to look after, these are animals that are being targeted by organised crime syndicates that use paramilitary tactics, and that is where our skills are most appropriately deployed. When we develop these strategies and we get them right, there are millions of other animals in these ecosystems that get to survive, they get to live, because of these key species, these high target species, and that is what really makes me tick. That's what that's my purpose. So it's not just looking after the sexy animals and the ones that are on the posters and people get on an aeroplane to come over here and take photographs of, but it's the millions of other animals in these ecosystems that have the same capacity as a cow, as a chicken, as a human, as a rhino, as an elephant to experience pain, experience suffering. The same animals that have exactly the same want as you or I to build family structures and to have safety, to be able to live out their life the way they were intended to. And so that is our purpose as an organisation. That's my purpose as an individual, is to make sure the teams have what they need to be able to go out and lead those operations. Rhinos, we're seeing a rhino poaching war, and this is an animal that's hardly evolved for 50 million years. A rhino poaching war that's been spiralling out of control for the last decade. One of our projects, we've been focusing on the Mozambique and South Africa border, which is home to around 40% of the world's remaining rhino, that area there. And we went in there 8 years into a losing war. We were able to set up a ground-level offensive against an insurgency that has had such a significant impact in that area and stopping poachers, seizing heavy caliber rifles and protecting rhino, that for the first time in a decade last year, we actually saw a regional downturn in rhino poaching, and that was because of a collaborative effort there from multiple agencies that we were a part of leading. It allowed Kruger National Park, home to up to 40% of the world's rhino, it allowed them to reappropriate their resources to their other more vulnerable flanks. And that regional downturn last year actually led to an international downturn in rhino poaching. We don't appeal to everybody in the way we operate or what we do. We appeal to the people that understand that another conference or another billboard in Asia today is not going to protect one of these animals right now. Long term, maybe, but today the only thing that's going to save one of these animals is a good person with a gun standing out there in the bush, willing to be between that animal and the poacher's bullet that's coming towards it. And that's a shitty reality, but that is the world we've created for ourselves to manage.
So I've got sort of a couple of questions based on that. First, help me understand how the millions of other animals depend on these keystone species.
People come to Africa to see the scenery and to see the wildlife. Now, they had the big five here, of which the rhino and the elephant make up 2/5. Now, when areas lose all their elephant, they lose all their rhino, the tourists stop coming. They go somewhere else. Now, when the tourists stop coming, the money stops coming in. When the money stops coming in, the anti-poaching unit stops functioning. The communities start coming in, they start poaching all the other animals. The fences come down. The wire is used in snaring of more animals. Eventually, there's no animals left. The trees come down. You have desertification. The rivers stop flowing. And you've got a barren piece of land. Okay, all the other animals in that piece of land have been killed. So that is whilst there is no, in my mind and in my conscience, there's no difference here between a squirrel and an elephant. Only the difference that we allow ourselves to financially allocate or intrinsically value. But in protecting those animals and going out to donors and saying, look, this is the flow-on effect. If we don't protect, say, elephant and rhino, everything else dies, then we can sort of put things in perspective and make people realise how important it is to have well-armed, well-trained anti-poaching units out there. Because when we don't, I've seen what happens when we don't. It's everything gets killed. Everything gets killed, and when something new sort of wanders into that area, it gets killed very quickly. Rhinos wandering into the area of Mozambique that we now help protect had a life expectancy of 12 to 24 hours before we got there. They'd been declared extinct in Mozambique. We're now protecting the only population of rhino in that country. So these are not the ultimate answers. I go to work every day accepting that, in knowing that what I do is not the ultimate answer. The ultimate answer lies in getting people on the other side of the world that want to be consumers in these products to not consume. We don't know how long that's going to take. Could take 5 years, could take 500. There's organisations that specialise as much in marketing that are working on demand reduction in countries like Vietnam and China. They specialise as much in that as we specialise in setting up ground teams of rangers and going out there against an insurgency. There are organisations that specialise in working with communities, getting them to a point where maybe one day they don't need to look at poaching to fund a lavish lifestyle, which some of them lead, or two, at a different level, a subsistence level, putting food on the table. There's going to be 2 billion people on this continent by 2040, up to 6 billion by the end of the century. So how do you get those people to value a long-term preservation of wildlife? I don't know. But what I do know is that if we don't hold on to what we have left, if we don't stop the hemorrhaging, and by the time all these other organisations and entities that we work with and alongside have come up with whatever the grand scheme is going to be on not a Mozambique or a Zimbabwe or a Southern African scale, but on a global scale, by the time they've come up with a master plan, there'll still be something left. If we fail, to acknowledge the true reality of what rangers need to be out there on the front lines defending these animals and these ecosystems. If we don't acknowledge that, there will be nothing left.
So what does fuel the demand? I have trouble believing that the actual properties of a rhino horn are worth $40,000 a pound. I guess there's a lot of mythology or folklore or traditional remedies. Like what are people paying that amount of money for, they think?
So in your mind, and perhaps even in mine, it may seem a little crazy that someone in Asia wants to cut the horn off a rhino and crush it up and use it in medicine. However, they have used forms of traditional medicine for as far back as, particularly rhino horn, as at least 2,000 years. Other forms of traditional medicine for much longer. Now, for someone who has grown up in a family, in a household where everyone believes in traditional medicine, whether it be plant-based or animal-based, it's very hard for us who come from a completely different background to come in and get up on our soapbox and say, hey, guys, we ran this thing through a lab and it doesn't work. Okay, and it's very hard for us to understand how someone who, from another culture, could even perceive that something like rhino horn could have any value whatsoever. But to them it does, and I think we need to acknowledge that. So whether scientifically it does or it doesn't have any medicinal benefits, in the mind of the person that takes it, it does. And if we fail to acknowledge that, then we fail to understand just how dynamic the market can be there in terms of rhino horn. Now, I believe a lot of rhino horn is being stockpiled within the black market and trickled into the market at a slower rate than what demand actually may be, and that is keeping the price very high. But it is being used, as it has been used as far back as 2,000 years, as a form of fever reduction. What is being marketed as now is this miracle cure oil, cure all from cancer to hangovers. But it's also being used as a status-related good, and that is it's the same as wearing a Rolex or driving a Ferrari. It demonstrates wealth, which is carries great importance in certain business circles within countries such as Vietnam or China.
So this gets really complicated, doesn't it, in terms of like who are the good guys, who are the bad guys. And, in a sense, you've simplified it for yourself just to say, like, until we can figure all this out as a human species on this planet, I'm just going to stand between these beautiful hunted animals and their extinction. Yeah,
I mean, exactly. I had a couple of things on this planet when I came here. I had money and I had skills. Money was needed to help the rangers and get this organisation going. And the skills were needed to equip these guys to go out there and have a greater chance of survival themselves, but also to protect the ecosystems they operate within. And I look, if the elephant and the rhino crisis is solved, I guarantee another species is going to move into that void. And as you get more and more people on this continent and around the world piling up in these larger communities bordering on these natural wilderness areas, you're going to have an increasing level of pressure coming on these species and these areas. Taller fences and more guns are not the ideal solution. I guarantee you the one thing I want in this world is to be able to work. But at the moment, you've got an increasing problem. It's not difficult to solve inside these wilderness areas. It's not difficult to solve. It just requires going back to basics and getting the ranger teams trained up to the right levels and having a good manager in place. Where it becomes complex is outside of the wilderness areas, in the communities, across the ocean in Asia. That is complex. I can write on the back of a bus ticket what it takes to protect these wilderness areas inside. It becomes complex outside.
Mm-hmm. So are there conflicts within the Southern African governments in where you're working around, because they want tourism, they want to be seen as good global citizens, and are they receiving billions of black market dollars that make it hard for them to say no to poaching or to fund the rangers appropriately?
Yeah, look, I don't think they're receiving huge sums of money, definitely not in the millions or billions, but there are certain people involved at certain levels within particular countries, bearing in mind there's 56 different countries across the continent here, each with their own political landscape. There are people that are involved in politics and are involved with poaching, and Africa is ripe with corruption. It's something that needs to be managed. Coming to Africa and getting upset with corruption is like going to the beach and getting pissed off with the sand. It's there, expect it. You just need to learn how to manage it. And some of the countries we operate in are better than others, but bearing in mind we like to go to where the situations are worse. So that also has a reason, why some of the areas we're operating is as hostile as they are. And it's often because there's regional political and economic instability, and that's just the nature of the work we're involved with. We need to go where the problem is worse.
Mm. So one of the things I've been feeling during this interview is sort of my own privilege around being able to be totally outraged at the poaching. And, even in my question about the way I phrased it about the medicinal uses, I could hear, you sort of gently corrected me around not feeling superior to people with traditional views. And the first time I came across you and your work was the TED Talk you gave in Sydney, where you started out by saying, at the end, I'm going to ask you a question, which is the reason I've come all the way here from Africa to Sydney to ask you this one question. And then you tell your story. And the end, you really took me by surprise by basically challenging the audience about why they eat meat. And the leap for me was staggering. First of all, what got you to connect your own food habits of animals that are not wildlife, that are not endangered? In fact, there's more of them than us. What was the thought process that got you to see the way you were eating as part of the same issue?
I walked around in the bush for a better part of 4 years, protecting one group of animals and coming home and eating another one. And I knew I was full of shit the whole time I was doing it. And I came up with some of the most fantastical excuses as to why I could keep eating cows and keep eating chickens and going out and protecting rhinos. And eventually it was too much for me. I couldn't bullshit myself anymore, really. What I was thinking and believing and how I was acting were heading off in two completely different directions. And it was denial, followed by ridicule, followed by violent internal opposition, followed by research, followed by acceptance, followed by action. And there was. Yeah, it's for me personally, it's the best thing I've ever done in my life is the choice to go vegan. I don't even have to get out of bed, and I'm doing the right thing by animals. That's the way it feels to me. It's like a huge weight, a huge burden got lifted off my shoulders, and so my passion is actually not anti-poaching. My passion is motivating other people to care about animals. I've just, this is the tool I've got to actually put my skills and our teams into action in the field protecting animals. My other weapon is my mouth, and talking to people about my transformation, my change, because I was a shithead to animals. A really bad person to animals, and I think my point of difference to a lot of people. This war that we're fighting on behalf of animals, you and me and everyone else out there, it takes all different people of all different shapes and sizes. And, I think, I can stand there and I can talk to a hunter, or I can talk to some of the worst cases out there, because I used to be one of them. And I think if I can demonstrate change, open up my heart and my conscience to animals and their desperate need for protection in all aspects of life, then I think anybody is open to change. So it's these animals are just innocent creatures, man. They deserve protection on so many levels, and us as a species, us as a society, us as 1 out of 5 million species on this planet. We're the only species that has the power to determine what level of suffering is acceptable for all other animals to endure. We should be protecting them, and particularly us as men. You know, men are perceived, and we tell everybody that we're the strong ones and the protectors, and we should be protecting animals up there with everything else that we proclaim to use our strength for looking after. Animals are up there with the most vulnerable in society, and it's not everyone's cup of tea because it makes people feel uncomfortable. The same way I used to be uncomfortable. I was uncomfortable because it challenged the truth. It challenged something that was an inconvenience to my habits. And once I realised or accepted how full of shit I was, it was a pretty quick transformation. And a really enriching and enlightening one for me.
That's weird. I'm sort of telling the story in my own mind, like trying to understand how you went from the self-described shithead that you were to animals, to someone who could see their innocence and their beautiful nature. It almost feels like you had to do that to yourself. Was there part of that you had to kind of see your own innocence, even though you had spent a life at war, as a mercenary, as a sniper, that you had to like return to some beautiful primal sense of yourself, or did that come later? Or
I think life for all of us is a journey of self-evolution. You cut away the bits that don't work, or grow out of them, and keep the bits that do. And I think that's all I've been trying to do is get rid of the bad stuff and keep the good stuff. And I think this is for me. I have purpose, I have passion. I'm driven by this. I'm protecting, not just the animals out here in the bush in Africa, but the ones I choose not to eat. It's the easiest way to protect an animal. Don't stick it in your mouth. It just, all the bullshit that you hear out of there in society. This animal's been ethically killed. There's no ethical way to kill something that doesn't want to or doesn't deserve to die. It's like me saying, I ethically raped your wife. I drugged her first so she didn't know it was coming. Just, because some animal gets a bullet in the back of the head when it's not looking, just because it grew up in a green pasture. That's bullshit. We can't do this to animals. And you look at the greatest cause of animal suffering on this planet is the meat industry. The greatest negative environmental impact on this planet that we have is the meat industry. It is helping to drive us deeper and at a more rapid rate into the 6th mass great extinction on this planet for the first time in history. It's a man-made phenomenon. The single greatest thing each one of us can do is to really step back and assess what it is we put on our dinner plates, because we are digging the grave of our species and of our generation with our own teeth.
So before I let you go, how can people find out more? How can they get involved? What are some ways that people who have been inspired to kind of reach out to you directly to support the IAPF? What can listeners do?
Yeah, thanks, Howard. I won't beat around the bush. We have people, men and women, out in the bush that carry weapons and required to do the job of a soldier on behalf of nature. These people, we operating these people like a small army, need funding to keep these guys and girls out there in the bush, to make sure they've got the right field equipment, salaries, uniforms, rations, tents, vehicles, fuel, aircraft, canine tracking units that cost money. And we need money. I used to hate asking for money, then I realised it's not for me. It's for the animals and it's for the people. We don't ask people from around the world to pick up an AK-47 and come and spend the next 30 years living in a tent. We'll do that for you. Okay, but what we do need around the world is an extended family of people that want to be part of this solution. These are not Africa's animals. These are a global asset. It's a global responsibility for us all to look after them. So no matter what figure people can spare, whether it's the same as a cup of coffee a day, or that maybe someone wants to put their hand a little deeper and purchase a vehicle, whatever it may be, we are appreciative of all and any contribution to the International Anti-Poaching Foundation. People can check out our website at IAPF.org or just Google anti-poaching and they'll see us come up there in one of the top pages there. So that would be my one primary request, is that people become involved with the financial side of the organisation and helping to drive these operations on the ground. The second one is we have a program called the Green Army, where we have people from around the world that come over and live with our rangers for 2, 3 or 4 weeks at a time, patrolling with them, helping these guys with all different aspects of their daily job. And people get to see Africa and experience Africa on foot. The other side of that two-way street is rangers understand that people around the world care about what they do and they're willing to get on a plane and come over and tell them about it. It's very important for the motivation and morale of these guys. So that's my two main requests. That or the third one, go vegan. I mean, the best thing you can do for the environment. So, yeah, I imagine you probably got to. I'm probably preaching to the converted out there today.
Hopefully, this message gets shared beyond the choir.
Yeah, I hope so. But I appreciate people's time as well. There's a lot of causes out there today. 95% of philanthropic funding around the world goes to humanitarian causes. 95% pushed into looking after one species. The other 5% goes to looking after the rest of the species and the entire natural world. So we've already got a small slice of the pie to be playing amongst, but we make it go a long way.
Yeah, it's funny. Yesterday I was interviewing Will Bonsall, who's a kind of the opposite of you in many superficial respects. He's sort of a hippie, back-to-nature homesteader, and he has been self-funding something he calls the Scatter Seed Project, which he's saving seeds and plant stocks of plants that are going extinct. These different varieties, and it feels very much like the same thing. Like you and your rangers and he and his seed savers are, you both have a vision for what the world could be like. And if you aren't doing this stuff on the ground right now, however you can, we aren't going to have the building materials to create that beautiful world in the future. Yeah.
Look, it's. I went through a couple of years of despair there, just thinking, this is all lost, and what's the purpose here, and what am I doing? And now it's actually magnificent. We have wars that are being lost, and wildlife wars that are being lost in certain places around the continent, but some that are really being won. And a good group of rangers is able to protect one of these entire ecosystems, and within that, millions of animals get to live out their life, and the situation would be much worse if we weren't all doing what we're doing. So, if that's any motivation for anybody, that the more they support, the more animals that get to live out their life. I couldn't think of a better reason to support some of the organisations out there doing whether it's working in the communities or working out there on the front line supporting rangers.
Great. What's next for you? You're continuing with this work. Are there any things that you're planning or working on or looking to do in the next few months or years?
Yeah, we're about to start phase 2 of a training program that'll train 16 anti-poaching instructors over the next 2 years. The flow-on effect of that over the next 2 years will be the training of 1,440 rangers. So this anti-poaching ranger college goes to the heart of one of the biggest gaps in the conservation industry, and that is good young leaders that can go out and run these types of operations. The top priority in conservation now on this continent is law enforcement. If you can't protect an area, then we can't conserve it. And that is what we are missing in so many areas, is the right leaders to run these operations. No such thing as bad soldiers, only bad generals. And we just don't have enough of the right people at the moment, not only within our organisation, but across the whole continent. A report that came out last year said 1% of philanthropic funding here is spent on leadership training. That means 1% has been determining how effective the other 99% is being utilised. And if we're getting it right as an industry, the situation would be much better. So that's our focus now in East Africa. East and Southern Africa is training instructors. We've been working a lot on special investigations in Mozambique and South Africa. So that's actually going right up the food chain, going to the kingpins of some of these organised crime syndicates, and trying to dismantle and disrupt their operations. So it's okay to be getting all these guys on the ground, the guys that are pulling the trigger and killing the animals, but we want to go after their bosses, the people that are sending them out there in the field, the people that are paying them, the people that are trafficking in rhino horn and elephant ivory. And these people are not poachers, they're criminals. They're involved with child prostitution, guns, drugs, and human trafficking, and rhino horn and ivory is just another currency for them. So that's, we are like a special operations of conservation. We are small groups of people that get big jobs done with minimal resources. And we like to go to the hardest hit areas, and we always scoping new projects and finishing others. Our job is to go in, stabilise an area, build a project up, and hand that project over to local stakeholders once capacity's been built. And to put it in a military sense, it would be like special forces coming in, stabilising a region, then handing it over to the regular army.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Well, you've spent your lives doing things that other people didn't want to do, and the job in front of you right now is so important, and it's so inspiring, and there's so much heartbreak and hope in it that it's been such an honor to get your perspective, to learn about you and your story. And I really hope that the listeners are going to dig deep, because without this work, as distasteful as some of it might be to comfortable suburbanites who can drive to Whole Foods and not have to think about it, like this is the front lines of the fight for our planet and for our humanity and for our collective nature.
Yeah, thank you very much, Howard. I appreciate the time, the platform, and just chatting with you, man. It's nice. I know we're on a similar wavelength.
Yep, I'm almost speechless and just in awe of the spirit that has flowed through you and through so many people, and your redemption and the clarity of your vision. And it's really helped me remember why I'm doing this too. So, Damien, thank you so much for all you do and for taking the time today. And the links for people to find out more and to hopefully contribute to the cause will be in the show notes for this episode.
I really appreciate that. Everything. We can't change history, but we can rewrite the future for every animal and every ecosystem we choose to make a difference for. And for me, that's more powerful than any sniper rifle, any war machine, or any defeatist notion that our individual efforts mean nothing. So why bother? So thank you very much.
Right on. All right, go from strength to strength, Damien. Be well.
Thank you, sir. Bye-bye.
If you enjoyed this episode of the Plant Yourself podcast and would like to help us grow, please subscribe and leave a review on iTunes. For more information about the Big Change Program led by me and Josh Lajani, visit bigchangeprogram.com. And be sure to check out the show notes for today's episode with links to Damien's TEDx talks and the International Anti-Poaching Federation at plantyourself.com/225. If you're new to the show, you can catch up on 224 archived episodes over at plantyourself.com. And if you get the podcast but not the Big Change Bulldog, just go over to plantyourself.com, and in the top right, there's a sign up so you can get my weekly-ish newsletter. Haven't done it. I've been traveling, haven't done it for a couple of weeks, but I will get back on track starting this week. Promise. So this episode has a transcript along with it, thanks to Kelly Michia. And if you would like to donate your typing skill, drop me a line at hj@plantyourself.com and we'll find a really good episode for you to listen to and transcribe. And then those in the hearing impaired and deaf communities can benefit from the podcast, as well as everyone who would like a written transcript instead of just having to listen. In garden news, the Austrian cowpeas are doing really, really well, but we have to shell them outside because of the weevils. We don't want them to find their way into our house and do their damage there. And we've got a whole bunch of greens, 3 or 4 beds of greens that have just started to pop up. So I'm looking forward to lots and lots of strong green food over the fall, winter, and spring. In running news, I'm really sore today. I played in a 4-game over 50-year-old Frisbee tournament in Princeton over the weekend. And the team I played with, the Geezers, we lived up to our name, and I'm still trying to get all the bones and muscles moving properly. But I did do my slow 6 this morning, which felt good. So a couple of folks have noted that they get annoyed when I read all the names of the patrons, and they've suggested that I just read maybe the latest ones this week. Maybe I'll do that, but right now I still really, really am happy to say all these names, but I have compromised by putting them at the very end of the podcast. So if you're tired of hearing that, you can skip ahead, go to your next podcast, turn it off, whatever. But I still want to say all these names because you guys really are the engine and the fuel that keeps me going. So here we go. Thanks to Plant Yourself podcast patrons: Kim Harrison, Lynn McClellan, Anthony Disson, Brittany Porter, Dominic Mara, Barbara Whitney, Tammy Black, Amy Good, Amanda Hatherley, Mary Jane Wheeler, Ellen Kennelly, Melissa Cobb, Rachel Behrens, Christine Nielsen, Tina Sharp, Tina Ahern, Jen Filanovsky, David Bizek, The Mysterious Michelle X, Elizabeth Feldman, Victoria Dolomanova, Leah Stoller, Alan Christensen, Colleen Peck, Michelle Landry, Josina, Julianne Rowland, Stu Dolnick, Sarah Durkis, rhymes with Circus, Kelly Cameron, Wayne Pedersen, Leanne Peterson, Janet Selby, Claire Adams, Tom Franzek, Jeanette Benham, Gila Sert, David Donahue, Blair Seibert, Dorona Vizov, Gio and Carolyn Argentati, to Jody Friesner, Ruth Ann Vanderberg, Misha Rosen, Michael Warbeck, The Equally Mysterious, Tracy Z, Alicia Lemus, Rebecca Hughes, Val Linneman, rhymes with Cinnamon, Nick Harper, Stephanie Holmes, Martha Bergner, Nicole Ramsey, Susan Ahmad, Molly Levine, The Inscrutable, Harry R., Susan Laverty, The Panda Vegan, Craig Kovic, Adam Scharf, Karen Burry, rhymes with Furry, Heather Morgan, Ashley Corcoran, Kelly Machia, Deanne Morton, Bonnie Lynch of Plant Happy Oregon, Sabine Kurtzals, Nigel Davies, Marion Blum, Teresa Kopel, Shell Rutledge, for your generous support of the podcast. And thanks also to Will Ridenauer for allowing me to use his beautiful song Sabali Dawn, Dance of Peace. Check out willridenauer.com for more of Will's music. If you would like to support the show, you can share this and other episodes on social media and via email. You can write that iTunes review, and you can become a patron of the show with an ongoing contribution, ideally over at patreon.com/plantyourself. That's Patreon, Patreon, or just go to plantyourself.com, click on the Patreon link on the sidebar. It will take you to the same place. If you contribute $1 a month, you get access to all the Healthy Habit Huddles that I have ever done. And as long as you stay a contributor, you'll get access to all the Healthy Habit Huddles that I will ever do. This past one was on self-criticism, which I have found is a strategy that many of us use. We think we're using it to encourage and motivate ourselves to do better, but it's actually a really self-defeating way of thinking and speaking to ourselves. And so I talk about that and suggest some alternatives. That's it for this week. As always, be well, my friends.